It was small, it was fast, and it was designed for only one thing: death. Near the final years of World War II, as Japan faced annihilation from the skies, they built a weapon so extreme, so desperate, that it seemed straight torn from a nightmare. Shaped like a rocket, carried beneath a bomber, and packed with enough explosives to obliterate a ship, it wasn't just a bomb, it was a manned missile. This is a story of the Yokosuka MXY-7 Ohka, Japan's cherry blossom, a kamikaze weapon that symbolised both the brutality of war and the tragic sacrifice of its pilots. To support our channel, please click subscribe. By late 1944, Japan was losing the Second World War. The vast Pacific Empire it carved out since 1941 was crumbling. American forces were advancing island by island, and the home islands themselves faced constant bombardment. The Japanese Navy had suffered heavy losses at the Battle of Leyte Gulf. Its once powerful fleet was now a shadow of its former self. Aircraft carriers, battleships, and experienced pilots were all gone. In their place, Japan turned to increasingly desperate measures, and I'm sure you've all heard of kamikazes. It was in this atmosphere that the idea for a new type of weapon was born, a weapon that fused technology with human sacrifice. The Yokosuka Ohka, literally meaning cherry blossom, was designed in 1944 by Ensign Mitsuo Ota, an engineer in the Imperial Japanese Navy. The original concept was terrifyingly simple. Strap a massive warhead to a small glider, put a pilot in it, attach rocket engines, carry it beneath a bomber, then drop it near to the target and let the pilot fly into an enemy ship at hundreds of miles an hour. The weapon would be manned by kamikaze pilots, volunteers who swore an oath to die for the Emperor. It was a death mission. It was a death missile with wings. The development was overseen by Yokosuka Naval Air Technician Arsenal, and it was formally designated MXY-7 Ohka. American intelligence would later nickname it the Baka bomb, from the Japanese word baka meaning fool or idiot, a cruel reflection of its perceived futility. The Ohka was little more than a flying warhead. Its specifications, though, were brutal. It was 6 meters long in length, had a wingspan of 5 meters, its top speed over 650 miles per hour, over 1,000 kilometers an hour in its final dive, and it carried a warhead 1,200 kilograms of high explosives. The pilot sat in a cramped cockpit at the front. Once the weapon was dropped from a Mitsubishi G4M Betty bomber, the Ohka would glide towards its target. When in range, the pilot would ignite 3 solid-fuel rocket motors, accelerating the aircraft to speeds that made it almost impossible to intercept, but the design had fatal flaws. The bomber carrying the Ohka had to get dangerously close to the Allied fleet, often within 20 miles. Allied fighters and anti-aircraft gunners quickly learned to target the slow, vulnerable bombers before they could release their payload. Once separated, the Ohka had no way of defending itself, changing course, or aborting the mission. The pilot would fly it directly into the target, ship, crew and all. The Ohka first saw action during Operation Kikisui, a series of massive kamikaze raids launched during the Battle of Okinawa in 1945. The results were mixed at best. On April 1, 1945, the Americans landed on Okinawa, just 350 miles from the Japanese mainland. In response, Japan launched thousands of these attacks, including dozens of Ohka missions. The first significant Ohka strike occurred on April 12th when the USS Manat El Abeili, a radar picket destroyer, was hit. The Ohka tore through the ship with such speed and force that it broke the vessel in half, killing 84 sailors. It was the first confirmed successful Ohka attack and one of the few. But most Ohkas never reached their targets. The Betty bombers carrying them were often destroyed long before they could release their cargo. In one mission on April 16th, 10 Ohka carrying bombers were launched. All of them were shot down before dropping their deadly payload. Over time, American defences adapted. They extended their radar coverage, used combat air patrols to intercept bombers easily, and placed picket destroyers further from the fleet to absorb these sort of attacks. Ohka effectiveness dropped sharply because of this. Still, the psychological impact of the Ohka was immense. Reports describing it as a manned missile was a chilling fusion of man and bomb, flying faster than anything most sailors had ever seen. As Japan's situation grew ever more desperate, engineers continued to modify and experiment with the Ohka. There was a Type 11. Now this was the original version carried by bomber, which had rocket propulsion on it. But there was the Type 22. This was equipped with a jet engine instead of rockets, allowing to launch from land. This required a catapult to get airborne, and this was never seen in combat. Similarly, it could be compared to sort of a V1 rocket, you'd say. There was a Type 33. This was powered by a turbojet and made from steel instead of wood. Now this was designed for mass production, and it came too late in the war to be ever useful. There were even plans to launch Ohkas from submarines, hidden caves, and even use them in night attacks. Most of these never left the drawing board though, but each version reflected the same theme: the chilling willingness to weaponise human lives in even more horrific forms. Let's remember the Ohka pilots were typically young men. Many of them were teenagers or in their early 20s. Like other kamikaze volunteers, they underwent a brief but focused training, not to survive, but with a focus on to kill, and to kill as many enemies as possible. Before missions, the kamikazes wrote farewell letters, drank ceremonial sake, and sometimes cut locks of their hair or fingernails to be returned to their family. Small tokens in place of the bodies that would, let's face it, be vaporised on impact. One Ohka pilot wrote in his final letter, and I quote, "Mother, please rejoice. I have been given a splendid opportunity to die. This is my last day. The destiny of our homeland depends upon the outcome of this battle. Your son is about to die for the Emperor. I shall go smiling." How horrific's that? But not all volunteered. While many kamikazes were passionate about their mission, others felt coerced, driven by societal pressure, maybe even their family, indoctrination to the Emperor, or the futility of resisting military orders. For many, the Ohka was a coffin with wings. So, did the Ohka work? In total, around 850 of them were built. Of those, only a few dozen ever flew in combat. Most were destroyed before they could even be launched. Now confirmed Ohka attacks resulted in 3 ships being sunk, including the USS Mana El Abaili, mentioned earlier. There were several more that were damaged, some quite heavily as well, but also there were hundreds of American sailors in these attacks who were killed by them. But the cost was staggering. Every attack meant the loss of a bomber usually, several crew members, and the Ohka pilot. And the psychological cost to Japan's military soul was even worse, and it was a descent into ritualised death, using young men, who probably had hopes and dreams, as quite simply a disposable weapon. The Ohka faded into history as Japan surrendered in August 1945, and none were ever used in battle again. The story of the Yokosuka Ohka is not just about machines or tactics, or even military failure. It's more about human beings. The engineers who built it and came up with it in their own minds, the leaders who sanctioned it, but of course the boys, the young men who died piloting it. In the end, the Ohka wasn't just a weapon, it was actually a symbol. A cherry blossom falling into the flames. Utterly tragic, really. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please click subscribe and share, it really does help. And once again, thanks for watching.